In this video, I'm going to show you how to start your assignment, how to start your PSMT. So we need to know that the key features of this Formulate section of the PSMT is really structuring your thinking and figuring out what I'm going to do to solve this problem. What I've got here is the descriptor for the Formulate section. It is design a detailed plan. The main concepts when you are designing a plan is identifying the mathematical procedures. So what I'm going to do to solve the problem. What maths do I need? I'm also going to need to figure out what set of rules, assumptions do I need to make in order for me to complete a relevant and reasonable problem-solving task, a solution, if you will. I also need to think of observations, which is really just a funny word for research I need to conduct and facts I need to find out before I can do anything. And lastly, I also need to decide how I'm going to apply technology to figure out the solution to this problem. So if we start with these things, observations and assumptions, that's where we're going to start. So let's take this problem into consideration. I'm asking you to figure out the fastest way to get from school to the Q1. That should say what is the most efficient way to get from school to the Q1. So as soon as I ask this, I start thinking to myself a whole bunch of questions, such as can I fly a plane? Can I take a train? Can I hop there on one foot? Does everyone have to roll on their sides? How am I going to get there? There's so many different ways I can get to the Q1, and they take different speeds to get there, or longer paths or shorter paths. There's so many variables I need to consider. Also need to consider, well, what time of day am I going to go? Because if I go during school time, I know there's going to be a lot of traffic because I've got to fight with parent pickup and drop-offs from school. And so in that case, will the traffic be bad? Is it better if I take a bicycle because then I can go around the flow of traffic? And what can I have as much money as I want? Can I just pay for public transport? Can I get an Uber? Can I get a bus because they get their own bus lane? You can see that this problem can kind of go on forever if I don't narrow it down into what exactly I'm looking at. That is what's so great about these assignments is you get to construct your own set of rules, your own set of variables and limits in which to answer the question. So that's what we're going to start with. We're going to take this part over here, this problem. This little problem is the first thing I need to analyze. So before I do anything, once you get the problem, the first thing you should be doing is writing down every single question that pops into your head, because we are going to use those questions to help drive this assignment. I'm going to firstly start by showing you an example of what not to do with this problem over here. So my first problem is, can I use any type of transport I want? I'm going to break this down even further into my observation and assumptions. Observations, again, is just a fancy word for some data or some real life research that is relevant to this. So an observation in this situation might be, I'm just skipping here to the part I need, is an observation. I might be able to go online and do some research, and I discover that an Airbus, which is really a fancy word for a plane, is the fastest out of all the ways I can get to the Q1. I could walk, I could bike, I could rollerblade if I wanted to, but it turns out my interpretation of what efficient means is that it is going to be the fastest way to get there. That is one element of what I'm going to consider being efficient. So I might go and look up and say, I observe that the plane is the fastest way to get there. However, this is a very, very flawed observation because it's going to cost a ridiculous amount of money to take a plane from the Gold Coast to the Q1. And where am I even going to get a plane to do that? It's a bit of a ridiculous observation to make. Yes, it is the fastest mode of transport, but it is very unreasonable to take a plane. if I was going to use this, I'd have to make the assumption that money is not an issue. I'd have to also make another assumption saying everyone has a private jet, which is completely unreasonable. So this is what we call a flawed observation and assumption. I've set up my assignment to be flawed from the beginning. Some people might look at this and go, that's good though, because it gives me more to talk about. But if you deliberately set your assignment up with a flawed observation, you're wasting your time, and it doesn't show great depth of understanding. So a way I can get around this is if I take that example again, which was very unreasonable, I go and do some research and I go, I'm not going to take a plane because not everyone has one. So a better observation would be the Gold Coast has a wide range of public and private transport. What that means is I have access to buses, trains, I also have access to cars and bicycles. So I'm telling my reader, yes, I am aware that there are multiple forms of transportation to get to the Q1. The second important thing here is that I've actually put a reference underneath here. That is what we call documentation. I have shown that I've gone and done my research, and I'm not just telling you things off the top of my head, but I'm actually giving you facts. So now this assumption here, a car, I'll read it out to you, a car will be used and it is the most dominant mode of transportation in the Gold Coast. So this is a rule that I have set for my assignment to follow. So let's recap. My first problem was, can I take any mode of transportation I want? This is where you get to make your own rule based off knowledge that you've gone and researched. So to answer this, I've decided that, well, there are so many different types of public transport and private, so our solution is going to be based on the most dominant mode of transportation, and that makes sense. I'm going to use the form of transportation that most people have available on the Gold Coast. So I've already narrowed down my assignment by saying, no, you can't take a plane, you can't take a bicycle, you have to use a car to get there because most people have a car. It's reasonable now, and it's reasonable because it's based on an observation that I have done some research on. So this is a much stronger observation and assumption link. And finally, notice that the assumption is always driven from the observation. They're related to each other. They're not unrelated. They need to be, the more related they are, the stronger your report is going to be. And I haven't just reworded the observation, which is an easy track to get into. I need to take my observation and further it to make myself a set of rules. Alrighty, so that is one observation I've dealt with, one problem. Every single problem that you've got on your list that we wrote down at the start, you need to then make an observation and assumption for. So I wouldn't just have this one set of observations and assumptions. For my problem, I would need 4 to tackle these 4 different problems that have popped up in my head. So you might do a table like I have, but have 4 different entries into it for observations and assumptions, tackling each of these problems, repeating that process that we just went through. And the more we have of these to talk about, the juicier your evaluation section is going to be. Our second thing we need to tackle to do a good Formulate section is I need to pick out what mathematical techniques I'm going to use to solve the problem. I can't just use any technique I want. I can't just say I'm going to go out and sample 20 people how they got to work this day, because I need to pick something that is based on the topic I'm studying in class at the moment, or the topic that is outlined in your assignment. So when you go into your student planners, you'll notice that they are broken into topics. And these topics will be outlined on the front of your task sheet. It'll say you have studied topic 1, critical path analysis and backwards planning. You have also studied topic 2, which is contingency tables. So I need to go to the relevant parts of my student planner and pick out in this section here, you see all these dot points. These are all the skills and techniques that I have used for those topics. So if I look through this first one, do I want to do queuing situations? No, that doesn't apply to mine here. I go through each of these and think, do I need to calculate commission and GST? No, that doesn't help me at all. But what I could do is I get down here and I see, oh, I can construct a scatter plot